Welcome to the Optimalist podcast. I'm Sarah, your host through this adventure about mindfulness, attention, focus, happiness, and motivation, at a time when all of these things seem elusive and desired all at once. So how do we cultivate them? Today, I have a voice with me on the show that many of our current listeners will recognize. She is a self-professed, redesigned educator who's been in the elementary classroom over 20 years and is a professional learning specialist with Forward Edge and Edge U. Her distinct passion is to infuse joy in educational leadership by focusing efforts on serving and using her voice to foster hope by celebrating diversity. She's also a published author and illustrator of several children's books with themes around SEL, and she is the, are you ready for this? Chief Optimistic Originator of Imparted Joy, LLC in Clearwater, Florida, and guides others to spark their stories with heart and confidence. She's also a beloved member of this community, and it was a pleasure to welcome Jillian DuBois to the Optimalist. Listen in as Jillian and I talk about self-regulation and self-awareness as a parent, and how her individual story with her son has led her down the path of appreciating emotions and moments as they come. The ultimate chance to be present in your attention. All this in my conversation with Jillian. So welcome, Jillian. It's so great to have you here.
Sarah, it has been such a long time since we have actually gotten to have a conversation.
I know.
But this is awesome.
And if it's recorded for all to hear, then so be it. That's
I know.
Totally
you
fine.
You never know with the two of us.
I know this might wind up being a very long episode, but we'll try not to make it that long. But it's very exciting to have Jillian here. She's such a special part of the Optimalist community, and it's been so wonderful to get to know her over the last, I don't even know, when we first connected, if it's been a year. I don't know. I'd have to look back and see.
Yeah,
it's probably been about a year, right? Because you were in our book club journeys last year, and those started around May, so it has to be almost a year.
Yeah.
So Jillian, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of, before we jump into our topic today, which is self-regulation, I wanted to give you a little bit of time to kind of introduce everybody to your perspective of what are you doing now, and that could be career-wise and personal-wise, like however you want to like package that all together, but what also has influenced your path, like what has inspired your path to what you are and who you are today?
Wow. Well, it's a personal journey, of course, and everybody's got their own paths that they take. But I think for me, as a mom and as an educator and as seeing all of the things and the challenges and hurdles that my son has gone through has brought me to where I am today. He's the one who he's the reason why I became an educator in the first place. So with his struggles in school, and he's on the autism spectrum, has ADHD, is dyslexic, and while he is just an amazing, amazing kid, he needed a lot of support and fell through the cracks. So I jumped in and took over like moms do and decided, you know what, I'm going to help you as much as I can. So I became a teacher. That was kind of my goal. My goal was to become a teacher to help kind of navigate him through the system. And in doing that, I found that was my passion, and that serving and loving on students and being there for them to guide them, not just my son, but everybody else too. So that was my journey. And I ended up actually working in a classroom for about 10 years. And then I came home to homeschool him, Austin, because he really kind of needed my help in high school. So for 5 years, I homeschooled him through high school, and I learned so much by doing that with him, because it was not having a teacher background. I didn't know that hey, there's so much more than just sit in your seat, open your book, do your work. turn it in. Okay, the bell's rung, let's go. But when I was home with him for those years, it was, hey, if you want to like lay in bed with your headphones and read your science book, that's fine with me. If you want to go outside and lay on a raft in the pool and, work on your math, that's great. All of a sudden I learned how to evolve and how to transform and how to be that person that understood that, okay, learning needs and different learning styles are out there and we need to embrace them. So as an educator, I definitely had this adventure. And when I went back into the classroom after I had been with him for 5 years, I was like a totally new person. So I was able to, just differentiate my instruction with different tech tools and strategies and skills and understanding those relationships and building those relationships with my students and with my colleagues. And it was the best time as a teacher. And I think it was just time when I realized that it was time to leave the classroom. It wasn't that I was burned out or tired or exhausted or frustrated with the system. I just knew there was more out there for me to explore. So that's where I am today, actually, working kind of remotely in Florida for a company in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we provide professional development for educators. And I am just loving every minute of it. It's all tech-based. So there's lots of tech tools, and the teachers and educators have to provide submissions to us that they've implemented them in the classroom after they've learned them. And I get to review them and give them feedback and coach them. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful progression to watch somebody who didn't even know how to take a screenshot to be able to, use Flip in the classroom. And things like that you take for granted, So now I'm going back to school, Sarah.
Really? I did not know that.
I decided to get my master's. Never too old, never stop learning.
Not at all.
So start May 8th. I start with a Master's of Science in Instructional Design.
Wow, that's so exciting. That's great. What a great next step on your journey, eh?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who I have an idea and I don't let it start. And I think
I know that. Yeah. I'm like, I think we've bonded over a few ideas that we couldn't let go.
I think you're late because I think I applied, I don't know, had done my research, but I applied to 4 or 5 different programs and, was accepted. And then I had to kind of weed through them. And my husband, all of a sudden, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to, St. Leo University. And my husband's like, wait a second. This was just a thought in your head last week. And now you've accepted an offer. I'm like, yep. So he's like, whoa. I'm like, I know. So yeah, I don't let it sit long. So, and it's not that I'm going to overwhelm myself, but it's exciting to try new things and to do. So just like you're doing right now.
Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you before we get too far down this path of what we're going to talk about today and applying it to all of these things that you've already mentioned. Just 2 questions quickly about the transition, what the transition maybe was like going from, maybe for both you and your son, going from like in school to homeschool, and then what it was like. You said you were a totally different person when you left then homeschool, going back to teaching or being back to in-school environment. So like kind of what was that transition like? And you don't have to go into a crazy amount of detail, but then also how would you define the fact that you were a different person afterwards?
Yeah. So, making that transition into the classroom, I mean, I worked in ophthalmology.
Wow.
I was an ophthalmic technician. So I knew nothing about school and, other than what I knew when I had been to school. So, and, back then that's what it was. It was very authoritarian, and you sat in your seat and you did your work and you turned it in. And that's just what I thought, you had to be and had to do. And it was miserable. I hated it. And I stuck it out for 10 years, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I made the commitment to be here for my son. So I've got to do this. So I didn't even have that fire within me. I didn't understand. I didn't have, I didn't have experiential knowledge going into it. So I just thought that's what you needed to do. So when we made that decision as a family for me to stay home, I'll never forget, because my son, he just had struggled and struggled, and he kind of always caught up near the end of the year. But it was always such an effort. I mean, it was hours and hours of homework and just, yelling and, and frustration and resentment. So when we were home, or when we decided to come home, I remember we sat down and kind of as a family made that decision. And he said to him, I'm like, Austin, are you think you're okay with this? And he just like all of a sudden started crying, like just completely broke down. And I looked at him and I looked at my husband. I'm like, oh no, what did we do? Mm-hmm. And he kind of composed himself and he looked up at us and he said, I'm so thankful. He goes, thank you so much for doing this for me.
Wow.
He goes, I never, he goes, this is the best thing that could possibly happen. And, he'd never expressed it before. Teenage boys, they don't, they just talk about their friends and their social life. They don't talk about, what's going on the inside in school. So that just affirmed every decision that we had made for him. So, and I think through that, when I said I became a different person, I just looked at school through his eyes.
That makes sense.
So it was for us, it was very untraditional. I mean, we didn't spend 6 hours a day doing school. We may have traveled to, 45 minutes away to Fort DeSoto, which is one of the earliest American forts here in Florida. And we did a little history tour. Everything was so experiential and so hands-on for us, because that was his learning style. Right. So digging into that and just kind of like, I don't know, developing that and honing that style, and that everybody needs something so different. And as educators, it's frustrating. And it was easy for me because I had one.
Well, we won't say easy, but manageable, maybe, I would say.
No, not easy. And I do tease that he's much better at math than I am. And I remember when I had to we had to do algebra, and I'm like, Austin, I don't know how to do algebra, so you do the best you can working through it, but I'll be here if you need anything.
Right, of course.
So I'll do something, I'll Google something. And I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to dig in there and I'm going to do it with him. Yeah. And I did. I cheated through math in high school, so I did not pass algebra on my own. I definitely, was able to go back and learn with him. So in learning with him, actually even made it more special. Our family unit, in my heart grew, because I knew, okay, if I can help one person, I could probably help more, and try and figure out how to do this.
So our topic today, I'm not sure if it's clear to anybody yet, but our topic today is self-regulation, and I'm mashing that together with things like self-awareness as well, because I think that we always talk about them as going hand in hand. But you talk about this a lot, not just to me, but also in general, like in the way you talk on Twitter and the things that you reflect. Like you're always really open about not necessarily saying, here's all the stuff I'm going through right now, not in that way, but open in that, in saying like, hey everyone, today I had a moment where I felt like this, but it's okay because I was able to do X, Y, and Z, and now I feel like this, like different. Like you post little like hints or peeks into your reflective self, which I think not only give people a little insight into the way somebody is just handling life like every day and doing well with that, but at the same time, it kind of brings people together around a shared feeling that we all need to reflect a little bit more about how we do handle and regulate our emotions and get through just a day or a whole week or whatever that might be. But the reason I bring that up in introducing this topic is because I always associate you with this like just beautiful, calm energy. And the fact that I don't want to say so much, but you also like immediately will be like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe how scattered I feel. And you're so open about that because I don't see you like that. And to me, it's always like you're giving me you're so aware of like what, like you have a self-awareness that is so keen that it like when you talk about it, it like reveals like this side of you that I don't think people see. But I think that that's important for everybody because we're all on this same journey, whether or not we accept it or not, you're on it. And I think it's important for people to see that every single person, no matter how you perceive them in like out on the outside or in public or on the internet, everybody is working through the way that they, deal with the everyday. And so I think that that's kind of a cool, like because I had a feeling you were going to pick this topic, self-regulation. And I'm like, it's so great because I don't know that people really think of, oh my gosh, Jillian's like always needing to figure out her brain or whatever, but we're all figuring out our brain. And so I wanted to kind of, maybe we can just introduce people if you're not in really, I know everybody's a little bit familiar with self-regulation and we have some interpretations of it that kind of go around, but we think of self-regulation in terms of how you are able to, I guess, manage your nervous system and the connection between your brain and body and regulate that and accept. I also include the idea of like recognizing and accepting emotions as they come and pass and even like writing them down or something like that. But you don't have to not have emotions, but knowing that they aren't factual and that you have the ability to work through them. And that balance, complete balance, is not actually humanly possible. I don't know that that's something that's attainable, but you can kind of balance out by understanding that emotions don't have to take over everything. And so so like maybe we can just talk about, now I'm thinking about the experience you just explained to us and how so much of that experience with your son probably could have used a lot of self-regulation, especially at first, but not that you have to go back and talk about that again, but maybe you can give us some insight into like your, like why this is something that does come up for you immediately as soon as I'm like, hey, I want to invite you on the new podcast. Here's a list of 400 topics and this is the one that you go to. So let's connect us to your experience with self-regulation, why you feel it's necessary, and what you kind of want to divulge to us about this path.
Wow, and that's a beautiful, beautiful description that you gave, because I think, and I actually just pulled one word, a bunch of words out of there, but that one word that stood out to me was manage. And I think that's what we just have to learn how to do. And I don't think we're really ever taught how to manage ourselves. It is like an experiential thing. You do have to kind of wade through so much of the ish to get to the place where you can break through those fears and those expectations that maybe other people have put on you or that you've put on yourself. For me, it was more like I put them on myself than anybody else did.
Sure, yeah.
And, but breaking through that and breaking down those things to really embrace, I want to say your own, I don't want to sound cryptic, but your own power, what is within you. And for so long, growing up, I just believed that that didn't really matter. And that wasn't really a thing. And that I didn't need to do that and have to self-manage. My parents always told me, here's what you need to do. Here's, you should obey this, do that, stay away from this. And, that's kind of like the extent of it. It's not until we get older, more seasoned in our life before we go, what the heck was that? What was the past 20 years really all about? Like, okay, well, let's try and figure this out now. And thank you for saying I am a very calm-natured, and I think I am calm-natured to an extent, but at the same time, I definitely react more than I respond, and something that I've always worked on. And I have so many stories of amygdala hijacks that go into, and I used to break down. I mean, I used to be like, why is this happening? What I've got to fix it. I've got to fix it now, right? Because I put those expectations on myself, and then I'm a fixer on top of that, and I'm a reactionary on top of that. So I, and just anything that is conflicting does not sit well with me.
Interesting.
So I thought, how can I turn that into a positive, right? How can I not be overwhelmed by the things that are happening in circumstances and situations, but how can I really kind of go back into it, break down those expectations, break down those fears, and again, embrace that power that I know is there and try and, give myself some grace and figure it out. So kind of wasn't until honestly about 5 years ago that I just kind of started this kind of work. And I'm like, this really isn't that hard. It seems like I don't have the the scientific background. I don't have a PhD. I don't understand psychology. I don't know a whole lot about all of that, but I know how I can start to self-regulate myself. And I'll give you an example. So last week, and my son is older now. He's 25 and he's got a full-time job. He works for the city here, and he called me, and I was sitting here at my desk, and he called me and he's like, "Mom, I need to talk to you." And he just mine, and immediately I reacted. Like, I didn't say anything, but immediately, and I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but it's something in your brain that just flows through your whole body. It's almost like everything just went numb.
You don't know what's happening. It just starts.
It's like a tingling that starts in your head and goes all the way to your toes. And you're just like, there is something that just hijacked my body. And I'm in this out-of-body experience, listening to my child cry, and I'm trying not to, like I just wanted to pass out. And I knew it was like definitely one of those just times where what's coming, what's next? I was reacting. And he said, and long story short is he, was given a verbal reprimand at work for, not doing some tasks that he was asked to do. And I wanted to fix it. Right. And that's probably why I jumped to such a conclusion, is he was crying. He's breaking down. He's like, "I need to tell you something." And I'm thinking the worst. But at the same time, I immediately wanted to fix it. I'm like, whoa. Okay. Breathe, slow down. And we had, a really good conversation. But it wasn't until I could kind of tell myself, all right. And I asked Austin, I said, "Okay, just give me 5 minutes. I'm going to call you right back." And I put on my shoes, I put on my headphones, I took my phone, and I walked my dog. I'm like, okay, I got to get out in the fresh air, feel the sun on my face before I pass out. And I just started walking and breathing, and I realized, okay, this is not life or death. Yes, there's something that needs to be worked on. Yes, it needs to be fixed. What can we do? So I call him back and we work through it, and, we make a plan. And his boss is so incredibly kind. He got on the phone with me and said, "Hey, how can we work together? This takes a village. I want to be in your village." And goodness gracious, I'm thankful for people like that understand, neurodiverse human beings and, are willing to, we're all neurodiverse, to be honest, but to be willing to, I don't know, work together. And that's what we're trying to do. We're all just trying to work together. But just to have that come out of that moment where I thought, I got to fix everything. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to pass out. Like, what's he going to tell me? And to come out of that within 15, 20, 30 minutes, was huge for me.
Yeah. And think about how you're telling, that phone call is not a long phone call. 15, 20, 30 minutes of reactionary time, as much as it feels intense, is like a blip in the radar of even the day. And it's, and like I was saying before, like the feeling isn't the definition of the entire experience, but it's what you've remembered that because it actually was physically felt like in your body. But what, like how you deal with that afterwards, or how you're able to completely turn it around, or find, or like you're talking about connecting with those who are able to, I guess, understand and help help you with an experience. Like, I don't know, that it might be that you remember because the bodily feeling or the physical feeling, but it's the other part that really changes you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was almost like, because it was just a little blip of trauma, like I still remember it, and I still remember that feeling. It's so wild how your brain stores all of those things.
Yeah, and I think you also, and you could probably think of a bunch of other moments like that at different points in time. But another reason I think why you particularly, some people respond to the memory of them more than others because you're aware that you kind of want to do something about that, right? And that's where the talking about that's the awareness of it. And talking about wanting to get into more self-regulatory practice, like, I'm thinking about what you said to me earlier last week when you were picking this topic, the idea of recentering, refocusing, breathing. And you wrote breathing in all capital letters, like, because we're always talking about the breath and like, let's take a break. And before we move on to the next thing, give your brain space to like, do what it needs to do and then let it calm down and get back to it's all about being in the present moment, right? Because when you react to something, any of those moments in the day or in life, your brain jumps to all of the stuff that's not the present moment. And then and then your whole body reacts to that. And then like you're the only one who really can do that, can bring it back. And that's like, I'm getting all like hyped up here and I'm going on a tangent, but because I talk to people all the time about how, when we apply stuff like this to a classroom setting, with adults and students, we all dealing with the same kinds of things. But when you apply it to a setting like that, where you have so many people in one place, kind of relying on each other, and that's the dynamic setup where you have like, the adult is in technically, quote unquote, in power. And then, they think that, we think that their job is to help students do X, Y, and Z. But when it comes to regulating and becoming aware of one's own feelings and emotions, all we can really do is guide and kind of show and introduce what things look like. Because at the end of everything, like no one can really help you regulate that moment. It has to be you that makes the decision that I don't want this feeling or this emotion to rule everything every day. Yeah. Like I have too much to do. Like everything is too exciting and important and life is too awesome to make really to step aside and let emotion rule everything.
It is. And it comes back to that manage, just managing. And it's there's no magic to it.
But it feels like magic when it happens, which is cool. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, right? And I even always say, I find that I miss out on the small wins because I'm always trying to figure out what are the big wins, what are the goals that are going to bring the big result.
Good point.
And I think, okay, that was as cruddy as that was when that happened to me that day, that was a win, right? That was not a big, huge goal that I constructed for myself. Wasn't there? I did not have any massive action plan to accomplish, but it was to be able to, okay, this is a win because I was able to stop and pause and refocus and recenter and remanage how I was going to treat this.
Right. So if we, I'm just kind of talking out loud to our listeners for a minute, if you were to kind of, I don't want to say like, I don't want to put the pressure on you, like Jillian's the one to come to advice on all this, because so many of the people that you're going to see stop by this podcast are going to have many different stories from different perspectives, but all kind of coming together under this umbrella of how do we embrace a way more mindful, present life than we know that we are now. And so when we talk to someone like Jillian, and she's bringing in personal experience, like and people who are listening who know her know that what I was referencing at the beginning of Jillian being so open about when she's experiencing moments that might feel like a setback and how she deals with them. Like that's one of the things that I think endears people to you. And so like everybody kind of is aware that you do things like this and that you're aware of yourself. And so how would you kind of give anybody quote unquote advice for entering into the day with that mindset of like, hey, something might not feel good, but here's what you can do?
I would say, and I've said this before to my son, but I'm like, go, start each day thinking, hey, I'm going to find that $5 bill in the back pocket of my jeans today, that I didn't know was there. That's that sudden jolt of happiness and joy that, you don't think is there, but it's there. You stick your hand in your back pocket and like, oh my gosh, what's in $5 in my back pocket? That's amazing. So like just approach each day like there's something that you're going to find. There's something good. Look for that good in the daily grind. I mean, so many of us just wake up and go, oh, great, it's Monday, But
yeah, who wants to live like that? You don't like.
I know. And I think for self-care and to nurture yourself, it's like you just kind of have to. It's a choice, right? I mean, you have to intentionally make a choice to laugh at yourself, share an accomplishment that maybe with a colleague or a friend or your family. And just uncovering those little hidden gems of wins that make that positive impact on your mental health. And I always tell people, like, I don't know, I think I've written this maybe in a blog post. It just comes back to mind. But I always say, tell somebody about your wins, right? And not to brag, not to be boastful or like strut yourself, but just like that stream of accountability for yourself. It could be just texting somebody that says, hey, you know what? I sang all the lyrics to this song. I sang it way off. I sang it off key, but I remember all the lyrics to this song. Can you believe that? I mean, that's just small. But I mean, is that not an optimist?
Yeah,
race?
well, it is because, if you think about building up to a mindset where you increasingly are able to respond well, and treat yourself better instead of reacting harshly, the less the less you can either jump to conclusions or feel your body go into that reaction. I think that all of that is going to add up, and I think what you're mentioning is almost akin to like a really strong gratitude type of practice where we know that it's like nearly science at this point that regular like personal gratitude practice really does build up to this idea that we can regulate the way we feel and that it is a choice, regulate the way we react. And it's weird, like, because when you do just talk about it outside of the practice of it to people, and I hear myself talking about it, doesn't feel like the two things connect realistically, but when you do it and feel that, it does. So you just have to trust us, everybody. We're telling you the things that you that you need to just try if you haven't already.
No, and it keeps that momentum moving forward.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, okay, so if you don't feel like telling somebody, right, then write it down. Don't keep it in your head. I think the more we are expressive, whether it's in a journal or just
build your confidence, right?
Yes, and build that pause just to. I don't know, just to revel in whatever just brought the win.
Love it. I'm going to wind towards the end of this conversation, if that's okay with you. And I want to do something that I've kind of been explaining as this way to connect people to you as a guest and get to know you a little bit better in different facets of I guess who you are and the way your mind works. And what I love by asking a few informal questions at the end of the show is that I think we can often get some insights into, I guess, what connects you to some of the stuff you've talked about through the course of the episode itself. So no matter what it was that the topic was, we're talking about self-regulation. We can kind of see little pieces of Jillian that fit into the way you have been telling, your story, if that makes sense at all.
That's cool.
It sometimes doesn't make sense when I explain it beforehand, but at the end, it's like, yeah, okay, that kind of fits into the piece, or maybe it's total surprise and you are not the Jillian that we thought you were. And this episode will reveal all. So with that, and you can answer as many or as little of these as you want to, but can you tell us something you are reading, watching, or listening to lately?
Ooh, okay. Reading. I love to read, and I don't often make the time to read, but my favorite book that I'm right in the middle of right now is Prince Harry's Spare.
Really? Cool.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I've walked past it in many an airport going to all these conferences recently, and I'm like, should I just grab it for the plane?
Well, you should. It's such an easy read, but to hear him and to hear his voice through the words, I also have it on Audible, so I kind of go back and forth, but to hear his voice and to hear, and he's one great example of, an optimist, to be honest, because losing sight, he doesn't lose sight of the wins or his visions, and he overcame some of the most difficult circumstances that we could ever imagine. So I'm just intrigued, and his whole story, their whole story. I know people take their sides, but I just love listening to other people's stories. Okay, so that was reading. Watching, was that the other thing?
Mm-hmm.
Watching, I am a horrible, hugely horrible reality TV junkie. And I watch anything that has to do with people involved in drama.
See, this I wouldn't have guessed.
Definitely, whether it's Real Housewives or Below Deck or Vanderpump Rules, I just love, and my husband and I both do this because we're so people oriented. We love to figure out the why behind
I love
why
that.
Would she do that?
Yeah.
Why would he? What in the world are they thinking? It's so we sit down together.
It's like social psychology, studies in sociology. It really is.
It is. Because when we were dating, we used to go to the mall when there was malls, and we would sit at the food court at the mall and we would watch people and we would make up stories about people.
I love that. There's a podcast producer, a pretty well-known podcast producer who just started his own show called, forgetting exactly, but it's called Mall Walking. And he literally goes to different malls all over Los Angeles with a friend, and they walk through the mall and they ask people questions. Isn't that crazy? Awesome.
Fun. Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah. So maybe that's going to be what you're listening to pretty soon, which is the next question. What are you listening to?
Yes. So I actually am listening to a book, an audiobook. I also have the hard copy too, but we're doing a book study in our group, our female work group. And it's called It's Not a Glass Ceiling, It's a Sticky Floor by Rebecca Shambaugh. And it's just talking about really how, as women, how to kind of free yourselves from the behaviors that kind of keep you stuck in your career or, sabotaging your own success. So it's really interesting. I don't do too many self-help, women power to the people kind of books, but this is a really good one. There's a lot of insight.
And it's different. I used to never be someone, I'm still not really a self-help person, but I've had to dive into a lot of things that are close to that in all of the reading about attention and focus that I've done over the last year and a half or so, because a lot of those kind of cross over into what people would think of self-help. But it's a very different experience when you do read them with a group, isn't it? Because because you wind up bringing in your personal story to it. And I think we've found our theme that runs through the connective tissue that runs through Jillian, which is, that social aspect and that storytelling and understanding what it is that makes people, I think runs through everything that we've talked about today. And I'm guessing, but that's my guess.
That's really good. No, I wouldn't even have thought that. I feel like I'm having a therapy session. This is
and that's what we're going for here on the Optimalist podcast. So I'm just kidding, but if that's what we get out of it, that's what we get. But so that brings me to my very last question, which is, what is a method for focusing or improving your attention that you find actually works for you?
All right, I'm going to go back to just seeing the victories. Those victories are there. Those small wins are there. If we lose sight of the wins, our goals, I think it could prevent the results from happening the way that we're meant to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So just being more open to, not being so stuck, not being so focused on the obstacles, but looking more at the wins and the victories.
That also can sort of go hand in hand with not being preoccupied by the perfection of an end goal as well, right? And looking at what it is that you're doing along the way, and the challenges as something that are super positive, right? Even if they are, even things that do become obstacles, like tackling them. I find the way to think about that is like tackling them is a privilege, like to be able to have challenges that create opportunities for strength and growth and relationships and connections. Like everything good comes from facing that stuff, is what I think. And that's been therapy with Jillian and Sarah.
We'll play our part music then.
We are not licensed to help you in any way. I'm just going to put that out there. But if we do, please let us know. So Jillian, it's been awesome to have you here today. And before we let you go, I did want to give you a quick opportunity to give people some information about where they can follow you, and if you want them to follow you, and if you want to tell them anything else that you're working on personally. I know you have projects that you are doing, and like links that people can follow, and all of the stuff that Jillian tells us on the show will be in the show notes that everybody can click on easily and find.
No, perfect. Well, I do have a website. It's impartedjoy.com. You can also go to jilliandubois.com and goes to the same place. On Twitter at JillDuBois22. And yeah, that's usually where I am.
Just hanging.
Most of just hanging. So
cool.
But no, I love talking. I love communicating. Shoot me an email. Let's connect somehow on the website. But yeah, I'm always about, helping people share their stories and tell their stories. I think we all have messages to share. And I know that's just kind of been one of my big passions is just, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it to, be, I don't know. What is it? You don't want to draw attention to yourself. You want to draw attention to other people, or you want other people to understand that, yes, you can. I'm going to help you. I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that brings us full circle back to talking about self-regulation and self-awareness and how we can support each other because we all need to do it. But it's ultimately up to the individual, right?
That's right.
And Jillian and I would like everyone to just breathe after this episode. Thanks so much for being here, Jillian. Well, that's all for episode 2. Thanks so much for joining us. I love how easy it is to get into conversation with Jillian. Her story and the way she talks about regulating the nervous system in a way that is recognizable to every person is so special. She reminds us that our emotions are human and it's totally okay to freeze up in conflict, as long as we can understand how to get ourselves out of it. Thank you, Jillian, for lending us your story. But I'd love to know what you all think. Your feedback is always needed, always welcomed. So how do you do that? You can leave a comment on Substack, a review in Apple Podcasts, and you can reach me on Twitter at scandela9. You can listen and subscribe to the Optimalist podcast wherever you love listening to great podcasts. New episodes are released every Wednesday, and links to all of these resources are available in the show notes. The Optimalist podcast is brought to you by Focusable, the only app that gives you the pulse you need for better attention. And it's free. Create an account today at getfocusable.com or by downloading Focusable on any iOS or Android device. You can also follow us at Get Focusable on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening to The Optimalist, and I'll see you next week. Stay focused.